So some people have been asking about burst rotations on Arc. I figured today just pop out a quick video explaining what the burst rotation would look like typically in most bossing scenarios. There can be some variations depending on um, who's binding in your party, because obviously the origin bind existing now, and the fact that everybody's origins are not procced at the same time in their burst rotations. The issue with the origin bind is the way it interacts with normal binds is one of the two will be cancelled, so you'll lose the duration on whichever one you press first. So the standard arc rotation for your burst will be pressing your longest skills all the way down to the shortest duration skills, and then obviously pressing the big skills like Beast and Agony to actually inflict the damage. And the standard order is Divine Wrath, Charge Spell Amplifier, which is why they're on my quick bar like this, so you can see it at a glance. Conversion Overdrive, Infinity Spell, Grandis, Goddess's Blessing, Pirate's Overdrive, and then after that what you would do typically is press Blissful Restraint to bind the boss, spam Endlessly Starving Beast to place it, then you would press AB, which is in this slot here, and I'll quickly just change that for you so you can see it. So you press AB, Roaring, or Pouring, because it gets kind of frustrating having two rings of the same name. Memories, which is Mugong, and then obviously your actual Roar. By the time you've pressed all three of these last ones, which is your super condensed window, Beast will be a couple of seconds from proccing on its own, so you'd start pressing Endless Agony to speed that up. Agony's animation should begin, and before it gets to the big swing at the end, Beast should start proccing, so like the vast majority of everything you do will proc within a 1 to 2 second window. Because all of your impending deaths will be proccing off of these skills too, and now obviously we have the Awakened Abyss Blades, which is also proccing off these fixed tick skills. What you can do to add just a little bit more spice is as your Agony big swing comes out, like you'll see the Abyssal Guard appear, and it'll try to do the swipe. Spam Vengeful Hate, because you can actually bypass that the big swing and proc this as he's doing it. You don't have to wait for that animation to finish. That gives you more time inside the raw window too. So instead of waiting for the Abyssal Guard to finish his swipe and then press Vengeful Hate and then press something else, you've saved an input. So immediately after the big swing, instead of you can now go straight into Abyssal Recall. In your raw burst, what you want to do is you want to make sure you're in and out of Abyssal Recall instantly. So press the skill and hold the skill. That's the quickest you can get in and out of it. You don't have to sit there mashing it. Like, you can just hold it and it will come straight back out. You want to then press Creeping Terror if you have it. You know, a lot of people will use this as a defensive option, which means it might not be off cooldown for your burst, and that's not a problem. You know, there's different playstyles out there. They exist for a reason. It's not an issue. But if you have it, tap it because it does very high damage in a very quick amount of time. After you've done all of this, your original bind timer will be 2 seconds-ish away from finishing, and that's when you press Primordial Abyss. So you're losing 2 seconds of your original bind timer, but that's still really good, because Primordial Abyss, if you've done this all quickly enough, this will grow off. The whole explosion of it will be inside of your Raw 4. You don't even need a Raw 5 for this. A Raw 5 for an arc means you can potentially switch up your burst rotation later, and you can add the grips into the extended part of the burst, but it's very much like sort of added fluff at that point. Raw 4 is already very good on arc, because you can get everything inside of it. If you're doing your weapon jump burst, you may find in a lot of situations you don't need to come out of Abyssal Recall straight away. Like, obviously, popping it and then linking skills should lead to a bit more DPS. But the situation in a boss may not allow for that to always be ideal. So there might be a lot of patterns that are just going to stop you DPSing regardless, right? So you need to make that judgment based on what's happening at that moment. Um, what I do is I will typically sit inside recall for a couple of seconds on a non-origin burst, especially if it's my raw burst, which doesn't have the origin tied to it, because you can't move as much given the limitations of the raw ring. I'll sit in it for a bit, and I'll tend to explode it under one of two conditions. If I know the boss is not due to do a pattern where he'll dive or TP because he's already done it, so it's on an internal cooldown, then I'll pop it immediately after that point. If the boss doesn't do that because it's not in the list of things he can do, I'll still wait till the end, and then I'll come out of it as Vengeful Hate is coming off of cooldown. Because what I can then do is with the lingering iframe of recall, because you do have a lingering iframe as you come out of it, you're not immediately damageable. You can very freely spam Vengeful Hate without needing to worry about your position. So if you need to move slightly to get the procs because maybe the boss has moved or something, you can do that and you won't take any damage. It's not 100% optimal for raw output, but it is extremely replicable because you're playing a much lower risk game at that stage, but making sure your damage always lands. I'll just show you what the Origin one looks like in action. So, press dice, obviously, because you'll be doing that during the fight. Oh, got the cooldown reduction. And then remember, you press these in order. One small optimization you can make, which I won't do here because it's not always replicable in most bosses. Some bosses TP, and this is especially true if you're in a party and you have monkey teammates pulling the boss into strange places. Is if you're soloing and you know you're in a safe spot, you can place beast before you bind and before you press Infinity Spell and Overdrive. You can get a little bit more damage out of it because you're not wasting any time after you've pressed the bind and things like that. But honestly, I don't think it's worth it most of the time. I think it's better just to do the safe play. So we'll do the safer option from the beginning, which is longest duration buffs all the way through to the shortest. So you can just watch the quick bar as well. Okay, amped, conversion, Infinity Spell, Grandis, Pirate's Overdrive, okay, Bind, Beast, AB, Raw, Mugong, Raw, and Vengeful, Abyssal, Tap. So obviously Vengeful's coming back, so you can spam that too again. Now, that's pretty much it. It's that simple. You might see Will and Saren sort of up here. What you would normally do, because the 15 seconds of an Ozring is very condensed anyway, we have a lot of fixed tick rate skills going off in that window. You don't want to pop these inside that window because you can do significantly more damage from just linking your skills. You have all the impending deaths that are constantly proccing, you have the abyssal blades that are constantly proccing. So if you're trying to find a room for these, you want to place them just after Divine Wrath and Amplifier. Or you can even do it before. These skills just have not scaled very well in our current version of MapleStory. Back when they launched, game was very different, but they haven't been updated since. Even their cooldown just looks a bit jank because it's 250 seconds still. So obviously, like it's quote unquote free damage, but wouldn't focus on putting these anywhere near your raw. Not on arc anyway. They might be different for different classes because they burst differently, but it's not viable for arc. The only difference to this rotation, which I sort of alluded to at the beginning but didn't go on about it, if you're doing a boss like Carlos, let's say, which is a great example, with every test you have the stagger phase, your origin can cancel that stagger phase. So please don't press it there, otherwise you'll grief your teammates. Um, but what you'll find a lot of parties do is they kind of tail burst a bit. So they'll start bursting whilst he's in stagger, and then depending on whose turn it is to bind, they'll either do the origin bind first, count to like 8, and then they'll do some sort of standard bind. It may even be a Kana bind, which would be ideal because you have 5 more seconds. Um, or if there's nobody who happens to have an origin available per segment or for that specific bind that is front loaded, they might have pressed it near the end instead. You'll see with the other binds go first, and then you won't overlap them. But specifically for arc, the bind is part of your burst because it's quite a lot of damage, especially as it's inside the raw window. But you might find in a lot of these situations, you will need to be very mindful about when you press blissful restraint. I know from my party, when I'm doing Sikalos, a lot of the time somebody will origin bind immediately after the groggy phase, let's say, of Carlos, because we have a lot of front loaders, so it's very easy for that to be the case. But what that means is I can't use blissful at the start of the burst rotation, so I need to take it out completely. And in that instance, I would just place Beast on the floor. Start attacking as normal, sort of break your muscle memory a bit, and do the rest of it. When it's then binded after that by someone else, or if you don't have a Kana, like if you've already pressed Agony to its full duration and you've comboed for a couple of seconds, if you know that the current origin bind is like 8 seconds through, you can press blissful restraint to then overlap it, because it's, if if the longest duration bind you currently still have in the party is like 10 seconds because you don't have a Kana, it doesn't make a difference if you're overlapping the origin bind at the start, as long as you've let a significant amount of it play out. Don't cancel it too early. But that's one of the only alterations you would really make to this burst rotor. There's a couple of boss specific things, like if you're entering Kaling, instead of doing this full rotation as you sort of place Primordial Abyss at the end, it might be prudent for you to press Genesis and then do the standard rotation, but instead of doing Agony, you replace Agony and Abyssal Recall with Primordial Abyss, because making sure that Beast and Abyss go off before, let's say, Bird moves, because obviously the Bird will move shortly after you enter, or making sure you're iframed for the dog, things like this. Even Taiwo, if your party member happens to not be right next to you and you've decided to burst, he can also dive and get out of the way. So making sure that Primordial and Beast go off in the roughly the same 7-second window is really important. And then after that, you can try to do Agony with Recall. These both do collectively a lot less than these two do collectively. So it's all about optimizing which is going to absolutely land. But yeah, that's about it really. Honestly, like arc bursting is one of the simplest in the game, I think, because you just press a lot of the buffs. It can be a little bit scary after you've sort of bound to put Beast down, because Beast isn't protected by buff freezes, which is unfortunate. That can be a bit scary. We're getting 2-minute Genesis soon, which should make it a lot more consistent for a lot of players who don't want to risk the biscuit and push Jenny near the end, where you can sort of extend your burst. But in terms of like setup, it's quite simple. Yeah, I hope this helps. I know that a lot of people are always asking about burst rotations, and Yeah, just play it safe, honestly. I don't think there's any real reason most of the time to try to eke out every teeny bit of damage. But yeah, have fun.